My name is Ashok Parameswaran, and I'm the president and founder of the Emerging Markets Investors Alliance. The Alliance enables institutional investors to advance sustainability and good governance in the publicly listed companies and governments in which they invest. When thinking about sustainable finance, it is critical to address emerging markets. Emerging markets produce about 2/3 of global GDP growth, according to McKinsey. And the creation of industrial bases and consumer wealth in emerging markets are producing increasing amounts of waste, greenhouse gases, and other damaging land and water-based environmental impacts. If we can strengthen sustainable finance now, we can improve the chances of good practices becoming institutionalized into government and corporate policies earlier in the economic development cycle than in developed economies. Let me say a word about the paper's strengths, the winning paper's strengths, as highlighted by the reviewers. The winning paper illuminates a path towards effective implementation of policy by highlighting the drivers of successful implementation of power plants. It utilizes a novel and detailed data set, and the analysis represents an Africa-wide aggregation of micro-level analyses. And its conclusion is a wake-up call to the conventional scenario-driven future forecasts. I hope what I've said whets your appetite to read the paper. Now, on to announcing the winner. It is with great pleasure that I announce that the winning paper is entitled, "Is Africa Leapfrogging to Renewables or Heading for Carbon Lock-in? A Machine Learning-Based Approach to Predicting Success of Power Generation Projects," written by Galina Alova and Philipp Trotter at Oxford University. Congratulations, Galina and Philipp.
Well, first of all, we would like to thank GRASFI 2020, Columbia University, Ashok, for your very kind words, the Emerging Market Investors Alliance, for the opportunity to present our study at this conference, and also for this high recognition of our work. We, of course, really and truly appreciate that. We're absolutely honored to receive this Best Paper Award. For us, it's incredibly important to keep empirical, data-driven, and evidence-based research on Africa going. So this is really cool that this is being recognized. Which energy source is going to fuel Africa's economic growth in the next decade? How likely is that Africa is actually going to transition from its current fossil fuel base to renewables? These are some of the central research questions of our work. There are several high-profile projections in the literature that suggest that Africa is just going to leapfrog to renewables by 2030, projecting very high increases of solar and wind in Africa's generation mix. But while that may be technologically feasible for Africa, there's a trouble with these existing projections because they don't really look at how likely these scenarios are and what would be required to make them happen.
Great.
Sorry, Ashok, did you want to say anything?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, to bridge this gap, we built a machine learning based model to make a medium-term prediction of Africa's capacity in 2030. And we rooted this model in empirical data covering all countries in Africa and their electricity sector. So what our findings show, our preliminary findings show that fossil fuels will continue to dominate the capacity mix in Africa in 2030. And renewables will account only for a small share, and a much smaller share than the current projections that Philipp mentioned exist in the current literature and what they say. So what our research really does is to expose this gap where Africa is realistically heading to and where it could potentially be in 2030. And to find the ways to bridge this gap is really important. So also what's in yesterday's plenary session, OECD's Jorge Moreira da Silva said, you know, a lot of development finance is still flowing to support the fossil fuel project. It would be great if this finance was rechanneled to de-risk renewable energy projects, to de-risk investment in those projects in Africa. So there's still a lot that needs to be done to align the objectives of the public and private sector when it comes to supporting the decarbonization of the power generation sector in Africa. And our work is still a work in progress, and the paper is under review in a journal. But once it's published, we'd like to make it really widely available, accessible, not only to our colleagues in the academia, but also the practitioners, the actual decision makers in the public and private sector, to help inform their decision making and urgent action. But in the meantime, of course, we're happy to connect with whoever and answer the question. So please do reach out to us via email or LinkedIn, and we'd like to keep this discussion going. And thank you again to GRASFI 2020 and Columbia and Ashok.
Thank you, Philipp and Galina, for that excellent synopsis of your work. One question for you both. What are you basing your predictions on?
I can maybe take the question, and Philipp, you can chip in. We are basing, as you also already mentioned, it's really important for our study is to uncover those factors behind the power plant success. So understanding, we're rooting basing our analysis on the data of past commissioned and failed projects to understand which country level and project level variables drive the successful commissioning. And then based on this learning, we are able to make a prediction of which plants currently planned in the pipeline will finally be realized in 2030, by 2030. So we predict the probability of their realization, which is really important to understand, because just the fact that a power plant is in the pipeline doesn't mean that it will be eventually realized. It's actually far from it, based on what we see in the data.
Maybe I'll just add one thing there. So what is then really interesting to see, if you then do this using the machine learning algorithm that we have and apply that to the future pipeline, you can then aggregate that on a country level and actually look at how likely a certain pipeline on a country level is going to come online. And we see huge variations there. There are a couple of countries, like Algeria is one that I recall, where the pipeline is relatively stable and well designed in such a way that we predict a very high chance of all of that coming online. But then we have a couple of countries like South Sudan, I remember, Central African Republic, or Madagascar, which have a very poorly designed pipeline, many plant level variables that kind of where we have seen a lot of failures in the past, and how they are kind of stacked up. It looks like these failures will continue in the future. So you have a huge variation by country level. So that's one of the things that this analysis also does.
Well, thank you very much, Philipp and Galina. It's really a very important work and fascinating study you've done, and I hope the viewers are encouraged to read it. Thank you to GRASFI for this opportunity to give the award, and thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.